Hey, this is Brian with ActiveMelody.com. For this week's guitar lesson, we have a really cool, old school R&B, bluesy, rhythm and lead. It's hard to describe this because there's just a lot in it, but we're going to break it down over the course of 2 videos. So in this video, we'll take a look at the first half of what I just played. If you'd like to watch the second half, as well as download the tablature and get the MP3 jam track, which I have in multiple tempos, you can get that by going to ActiveMelody.com, go to the weekly lessons page, and do a search for EP331. Alright, so when I write these compositions week after week, I shoot for the 1 minute mark. I'm talking about the intro piece that I've just played. I've learned that that's sort of the sweet spot. If I go over a minute, I start to lose people. If it's less than a minute, sometimes it's not enough. Now this week's lesson is about 45 seconds, but it's full of substance, so don't let the length of it fool you. There's a lot of practical, real-world application for both rhythm and lead playing that you're going to get out of this, and we're going to break it down note for note, and you're going to understand how to use it. That's the best part of it. Now I'm playing this on the old Vega Odell, which is the 1950s archtop guitar. I've had this not for, I don't know, maybe about a year and a half, and I've used it in a few videos, and out of all the guitars I have, this one's my favorite. I just love this guitar. I can't put it down when I start playing it. So I'm using 12 gauge strings on this. People always ask about string gauge, and I tend to use 12 gauge on archtops. I like the feel of that. And I'm playing through the Kemper profiler. You don't have to have a profiler, but I have a little bit of overdrive, like I do every week. You can hear if I hit it hard, there's a little bit of breakup. Actually, you're probably hearing a lot of just the guitar since I have the mic right here. But anyway, that's what I'm using in terms of setup. So you could do this on an acoustic guitar or electric, doesn't matter. You just grab your guitar and try and learn the notes here. So we're going to be playing this in the key of D. And the first thing that happens is this intro that goes... Now, when I came up with that, I just sort of quickly threw it down, and I thought, well, maybe I'll work up a different intro later. But I sort of just kept it. And then it bothered me because I was trying to think, where have I heard that? It sounds way too familiar. And I realized, just as I was about to start recording this, I went back and I saw that I did a lesson a few weeks ago, which was EP324, where I played a very similar sounding intro. So some of you are going to pick up on that. I'm not trying to copy myself. I just sort of, I don't know, it was just stuck in my head. I was still kind of going for that Carol K bass line kind of thing. And this rhythm track feels that way. And actually, it's the same drum track that's used in EP324 as well. So some of you will find that interesting. You can compare this week's lesson to that one and see how, with using the same drum track but changing the chords on top of it, you get a totally different feel. So anyway, just wanted to mention that. So here's how we start it. It comes in on the 3. So when you're counting it, it's 1, 2, 3. And it's 1, 2, 3, all played on the open 5th string, or that open A string, down, up, down with the right hand. And then we play the 2nd fret, 5th string, open 4th string, back to the 2nd fret, 5th string, and then we end on the open 4th string, which is your D note. That open 4th string is a D. So all together from the intro, we have 1, 2. Now after that, while that note's ringing out, I go ahead and put my fingers in position to play the D chord. Now, after that, I played... So that's F sharp, hit it twice, and up to a G chord. Now the way that I'm playing that is I'm not playing all 6 strings, I'm just playing 5 strings. I think of it, this is how I learned to play an F chord. When I was learning chords in first position, I learned to bar these first 2 strings with my index finger, and then these other fingers fall into place, just like an E chord would be. And I found that to be, I've used that chord shape really since I was 15. That's just the way that I learned it. And some people will wrap their thumb over and grab that 6th string. I see a lot of players doing that. I've never been able to do that, at least not comfortably. So what I've done over the years is I've just adapted and played the top 5 strings. You don't need to play that bass note anyway. Your bass player is going to be covering that in the band. So I hit that twice. That's the F sharp. And then I slid it up one more, which would be a G. So let's back it up from the beginning. We have 1, 2. Notice that slap there after the 2 F sharps. It just gives it a little bit of a rhythm thing. And part of this for me is keeping that rhythm with the right hand. I say this week after week, but that's the key to being a rhythm player, is keeping your hand in motion. You're kind of dancing with that right hand. Now after the G, then I played a G minor 6 chord. And the way that I'm playing it is I'm keeping that bar there on the 3rd fret, barring the first 3 strings, but my pinky comes down on the 5th fret 2nd string, and my ring finger is playing the 5th fret 4th string. So in actual fact, I'm playing strings 4, 3, 2, and 1 to play that G minor 6 chord. So we're going from the G major chord to the G minor chord, or G minor 6. That's a really cool sound. And the Beatles would do that quite a bit, where they would play the 4 chord and then the minor 4 chord and then the 1. So they'd play like a C minor, and then back to the 1. So when you're writing music and you're looking for some kind of creative way to create tension and release, just remember that. You got your major chord, you can always do a minor version of that same chord and then go on to the next one. All right, so let's back up from the beginning. We have 1, 2. Notice that when I played the G chord, I played it twice, 2 downstrokes, down, down. Same thing with the G minor 6, down, down. Now we go back to the 1 chord, back to the D, do the same rhythm, down, down. Let the first one ring out. And then we go to an E chord, and the way that I played it was I hammered on with my index finger to the 1st fret 3rd string, and then I do an upstroke on strings 1 and 2. So it goes. And I use that technique pretty much any time I play an E chord. I just like the sound of building into that chord like that. And you might as well do that if you're playing an E chord, because it just works out. I mean, it depends on the sound you're going for, but if you're going for anything remotely bluesy, just hammering on that index finger, that could be a little takeaway for some of you. Some of you might not have thought about that. Okay, so after the E chord, then I come up and play the 5 chord, which is the A. And the way that I'm playing that is barring the first 4 strings on the 2nd fret, playing strings 5, 4, 3, and 2. So from the E, notice after that I played the E, there was a muted strum there, right into that A chord. So after you make that A chord, then I come up here with my pinky and play the 5th fret 1st string and do an upstroke with my right hand. And all that is another way of making an A chord. It's just another voicing. So you've got your A chord like this, where the open, the E string rings out, that open 1 string, or you can make it like this, where you've got your pinky on the 5th fret 1st string. The other way to think about that is where your pinky is, that's the same fret where you would bar if you were to make this version of the bar of the chord, which would be your A major chord with a bar on the 5th fret. Okay, let me back up from the beginning now. We'll play through all the chords of this thing. 1, 2. Okay, that's the first cycle through. Now the second time through, to keep it interesting, I played a lead part. So we've already established the rhythm, and so the band is playing along. I'm assuming you're a premium member and have access to the jam track. Even if you don't, you can still learn how to play all of this, but it does help with the jam track. So the next part goes like this. I love this lick. It's a real bluesy lick played in the key of D. It's a D minor pentatonic scale. And here's how I'm going to play it. I'll show you how to play it, then I'll show you how to think about this so you can get to this lick anytime you want to use it. So what I'm doing is I've got my index finger on that 5th fret 1st string, I've got my middle finger on the 6th fret 2nd string, and then I've got my pinky coming down on the 7th fret 1st string. And I started with my pinky up here and went, so I put it on and then took it off, down, up with the right hand. And then I came down and played that 6th fret 2nd string. So after that, I played. So that's the 7th fret 3rd string, 5th fret 3rd string, and then a quick slide from the 7th fret 4th string down to the 5th fret. So it goes, and then down to the 3rd fret 4th string, and then take your hand off to play that open D string. So all together you have. Notice when I played that 3rd fret, 4th string, I pushed that note sharp. Now what is that? Well, that's that D minor pentatonic scale, but it's pattern 4. So those of you that keep up with the pattern thing, I've got the 5 patterns defined in the blues lead course, which you can access as a premium member. But the way that you can think about this and get to this lick easily is to think about your chord shape. So this goes back to the cage thing, but if we think about the A chord shape, not the A chord, but that A chord shape, playing your D chord using the A chord shape, so it would look like this. Take your A chord down in 1st position, slide it all the way up so you're barring on the 7th fret up here. And if you look at these 2 fingers, they're between the 5th fret and the 7th fret. Remember when we made that lick, we went between the 7th fret and the 5th fret. So you can see that lick lives at the top of that chord. Think of it that way. It's a little hat that you can stick on that chord. So if you were playing a C, for example, now you can get to that lick anytime you want, just by picturing that A chord shape. And why did that work? Well, we're playing in the key of the song for that one lick. Even though we were playing, technically the song was over an A chord, I just went ahead and went into that minor pentatonic scale for the key of the song, and that would work. So that means you could play any D minor pentatonic lick there. So that should be a light bulb that goes off for some of you. And actually, if you're a premium member and have that jam track, I would recommend practicing throwing in some other licks. Instead of just doing that, you know, any of these minor pentatonic licks that you can work in, they're all going to work as long as you're playing them in the key of D. You can play any of the patterns. It doesn't matter. The patterns are just the same 5 notes. They're just repeated in different spots. It makes it easier to sort of chunk it up. Okay, let's back up from the beginning and play up to that point. So you have 1, 2. Okay, now while that D note's ringing out, you can take your hand off because it's, you know, there's an open string there. It gives you a chance to reposition your hand. But what I played there are these notes. Let me show you how to play them, then I'll show you how to connect it to something. So it's the open D string. We're going to do a quick slide from the 2nd fret to the 4th fret on the 4th string with your ring finger, so that your index finger can come down on the 2nd fret, 3rd string. And then a hammer on from the 2nd fret to the 3rd fret on the 3rd string. Ring finger goes down on the 4th fret, 4th string. So all together that lick goes. Now what's going on there? Think about the chords underneath it. And this is going to really help you think about playing the chord changes in a very simple, practical way. So remember the chords, we played through them the first time. It was a D chord, F sharp chord. So look at the notes on the F sharp chord. These 2 notes here, if you look at where my middle finger is on the 3rd fret, 3rd string, and my ring finger on the 4th fret, 4th string, those are just 2 notes in that F sharp minor chord. So it sounded really good when you hear that lead part without the chord under it, because we're tracing the notes of the chord. It's a much more sophisticated lead than if we just stayed in the major or the minor pentatonic scale, for example. And hopefully that makes sense to you. And that's why playing the chord changes, that's that advanced level of playing lead. When you can play the chord changes, or even beyond that, play through the changes, which is a whole other thing that I've heard Josh Smith talk about. But when you can do that, you really become a much more melodic and a meaningful player. Your solos have a whole life of their own. So this is a very simple way of doing it, but this is how I do it. I'm not advanced at this, but I can do it. And that's what I'm doing. I'm just picturing the notes out of that chord. And the next note I played goes like this. It came up to the 4th fret, 4th string. Now what is that note? Well, remember the chords. We had that F sharp, and then we had the G chord. And if you look at your middle finger there, it's on the 4th fret, 4th string. So that's just that note that lives in the chord, in that G chord. And then I played. Now what is that? Well, let's do that bend there. That's the 5th fret, 2nd string, bend and release, pull off, which would be, and so your index finger stays on the 3rd fret 2nd string. And then it comes down and I play the 3rd fret 3rd string of that index finger. That sounds really good, but why? Well, that's because that's the note in the next chord, which is that G minor 6 chord. Remember, if you look at that chord, that note is in that chord. And so I was just picturing those chords as I was playing that lead. Like, how can I touch on the notes that are meaningful? Now, I could have played any of the notes in that chord, but that one was just right next to where I was at. Okay, so then the song goes back to the D chord, and it plays the A chord, and then back to the D chord. That's what we did in the rhythm part. And so what I played was a classic turnaround, a walk down, harmonized 6 lick that you've heard in lots of songs, lots of blues and country. Now let me show you how to play this, and then I'll help you connect this to something so you can do this anytime you want. So we're starting with those 2 notes. So that's my index finger on the 2nd fret 3rd string, my middle finger on the 2nd fret 1st string. Well, what are those 2 notes? Well, those are just the 2 notes in the D chord, right? Strings 3 and 1 out of that D chord. So I didn't play the full chord, and it sounds better sometimes just to isolate 2 strings out of a chord. Or even 1, like we did with that G minor 6 chord. So I'm playing those 2 notes. Now I'm going to walk that down, and then walk it down again. So now we take our hand off and play 3 and 1 open. So you have, and then we're going to come down so that your middle finger is on the 4th fret 4th string, and your index finger is on the 3rd fret 2nd string. Now I'm using hybrid picking for that. That means I'm picking with my pick on the 4th string. I'm using my ring finger to pluck on that 2nd string. But you could use your pick on both of those, whatever's easiest. I recommend trying to get into hybrid picking though, because you'll use it a lot the farther down the road you get. Now, so here's how you want to think about that. The way that I think about doing what I just did I'll give you 2 ways. One is, those 2 notes are in the D chord, right? Well, there's different ways you can make a D chord. I could make it like this. I can make it like this. Same chord shape, but I've got my ring finger now on the 4th fret 4th string. Now, if I made the chord like that, look at those 2 notes. Those are the 2 notes we ended on. So remember, we started here, and we walked down to here. So we just walked it chromatically down to that part of the chord shape. The other way you can think about it is to think about your D chord up here. That's using that A chord shape out of Caged. Look at strings 2 and 4. Same 2 notes, right? So maybe a light bulb went off for somebody out there where you think, okay, so I've got that harmonized 6 in that chord. Here's the D chord up here. I've got the same one here. So now I can walk that same thing. Remember, we walk it chromatically. That means fret by fret. So we can down to this note. So all I'm doing there is I'm going from this chord shape to this chord shape, and I'm just connecting them chromatically. So now you can do that anywhere, over any chord. It doesn't have to just be a D chord. If I said, I could quiz you and say, try that over an E chord, how would you do it? And you have different ways you could do that. Come up here and find your E chord shape. Right? Or same notes, you can play it in different spots. So always kind of quiz yourself on this stuff. When you learn something, don't just take it and, that as the end of it. That's just the beginning, and then sort of play around with it and figure out how you can start to use it. All right, so there's only one other part. So after that walk down, the song goes to the next part. So the next part goes from into a G chord. So I was already playing these 2 notes out of that D chord. Remember this, the D chord that looks like this. So to get into that G chord, I just went right into that G chord, which is right there. I was pretty much there anyway. So I went ahead and I left my index finger on the 3rd fret 2nd string. My ring finger goes down on that 5th fret 3rd string. And I go back and forth between strings 2 and 3. And then I go ahead and go right into the G chord right there. So that's your G bar chord. I'm just playing. I don't make the full bar. I just need those 4 strings out of it. I just try and grab what I can. And that's another thing you should always remember about playing chords. You don't have to play all 6 strings. That took me years and years to figure that out. I always assumed because when you learn chords in first position, you're either playing 5 strings or 6 strings for the most part, except for a D chord. Well, it depends on how you make the D chord, I guess. But you're covering all those strings. And as you get further down the road, you realize, oh, I can just play 2 notes or little triads. And it doesn't matter when you've got a full band anyway, or a jam track. All you're doing is you're just complementing the band. There's no rule that says you got to play a whole bunch of strings to play rhythm. All right, so that's all we have for part 1. Let me back up, and I'm going to play through it one more time. I'll play it through it slowly, and then we'll see you in part 2. And if you're not a premium member, look into it. It's an awesome deal. I put out lessons like this every week. I've been doing it for almost 10 years now. I think so. Yeah, it's pretty close to that. Lots and lots and lots of lessons. You have access to all of it. So here we go from the beginning. 1, 2.